let's talk about the science and in particular the biology and neuroscience of setting and achieving goals. Setting and achieving goals is not a uniquely human endeavor. Other animals set and attempt to achieve goals. A honeybee attempts to collect honey and bring it back to the hive. A herbivore will go out and forage for plants and will also have a need to reproduce at some point in its life. So it will need to find a mate and maybe even raise the young, depending on what species that is. Predators will have to hunt and kill and eat their food, and they have to avoid getting injured in that process. They also have to raise young, etc. So humans are among the other animals, or we could say the animals are among us, in the need to set goals and to make efforts to achieve those goals. Now, why do I emphasize this commonality of process? The reason I emphasize this commonality of process is that it turns out that there is one basic system by which all animals, including humans, set and attempt to achieve goals. Now, humans are unique in our ability to orient our mind toward immediate goals, moderately termed goals, meaning things that might exist on the scale of a week or a month or even a year, and very long-term goals, like a lifetime goal or a goal that lasts a decade or it takes a decade to achieve. That's what makes us unique. And of course, we don't have access to the mindset or the thinking or the emotions of other animals, but what we do know is that common neural circuits, meaning brain areas that are present in animal species and in humans, are responsible for orienting our thinking and our action toward particular goals. Another thing that's really unique about the human brain is that we are able to have multiple goals interacting at once. So, for instance, we probably all have fitness goals, goals in relationships of different kinds, friendships and romantic partnerships, as well as maybe scholastic goals. Maybe you're in school, you're pursuing some kind of learning outside of the school environment, or you have business goals or financial goals. We are able to have multiple goals at once. And other animals do this, but humans are unique in the ability to juggle a lot of goals. And actually, one of the major challenges in pursuing goals is that goal pursuit often interacts, meaning if you can spend 100% of your time chasing one particular goal, that might be very effective for that goal, but then we tend to fall back on some of our other goals. You can imagine how this plays out. If you're working very, very hard, you're solely focused on business, often your health will suffer. If you're solely focused on your health, often other things will suffer. And so we have to juggle both our goal setting and our goal pursuits. And today we're going to talk about a number of different ways to work with what could very well be called these interleaving goals by focusing on a common practice or common set of mechanisms that are present in all aspects of goal seeking. What is that process? Well, it turns out it's a neural circuit. A neural circuit is simply a collection of brain areas that, when active in a particular sequence, give rise to a particular behavior or perception. So, for instance, when you feel happy, it's not because you have a brain area that's the happy brain area that is electrically active. Rather, it's going to involve numerous brain areas being active in concert and to different degrees. In the same way that the keys on a piano together, played in the appropriate sequence, represent a particular song. You would never say that one key on the piano represents that song, but that key is necessary. Similarly, in the brain, we can say that a brain area might be necessary but not sufficient to give us a particular experience or generate a particular behavior. So when we think about goal seeking and the pursuit of goals of any kind in the brain, it doesn't matter what the goal is. It involves a common set of neural circuits. And the neural circuit that I'd like to orient us toward today, and we will return to it a few times, involves learning a couple of names, but you don't have to worry so much about memorizing these. Just more important is to understand the logic of how it's put together, and I will explain that and make it very clear. If you want to learn the names, that's great. One of the brain areas is the so-called amygdala. The amygdala is most often associated with fear, so you might say, wow, how is that involved in goal-directed behavior? Well, a lot of our goal-directed behavior is to avoid punishments, including things like embarrassment or financial ruin or things of that sort. And so the amygdala and some sense of anxiety or fear is actually built in to the circuits that generate goal seeking and our motivation to pursue goals. The other areas are the so-called ventral striatum. The striatum is part of what's called the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia is a neural circuit that can very simply be described as a neural circuit that helps us generate go, meaning the initiation of action, and no-go, the prevention of action type scenarios. Let me make that even simpler. The ventral striatum is part of this thing called the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia has sort of two circuits within it. One circuit is involved in getting us to do things like I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm going to run 5 miles first thing in the morning. I don't know if I'm actually going to do that, but I'm just using that as an example. Another circuit within the basal ganglia is a no-go circuit. It's the one that says, no, I'm not going to go for the second cookie or the third cookie. I'm not going to eat that. And then the go circuit would be the one that's responsible for instead eating something else. Okay, so we have go and no-go circuits within the basal ganglia. So we've got amygdala, so think of as kind of fear and anxiety and avoidance. We've got the basal ganglia, which are for initiating action and preventing action. And then there is the so-called cortex. The cortex is the outer shell of the brain, and there are two subregions of the cortex that are involved in goal-directed behavior. One is the lateral prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex is involved in so-called executive function, things like planning, thinking about things under different time scales, so not just what we want in the immediate term, but what we might want tomorrow or the next day and how our actions currently are going to relate to the future. And the so-called orbitofrontal cortex. Orbitofrontal cortex has a large number of functions, but one of the key functions of the orbitofrontal cortex is involved in meshing some emotionality with our current state of progress and comparing that emotionality to where it might be when we are closer to a goal. Okay? So there are basically 4 areas, one involved in anxiety, one involved in emotion, one involved in planning, and another involved in this go, no-go action. So that's a bunch of detail, but if I wanted to make it really simple for everyone, I would say there are 4 areas. One is an area associated with anxiety and fear. It's the amygdala. The second is involved in action and inaction. Remember, go and no-go. So that's the basal ganglia. The other one is involved in planning and thinking across different timescales. So that's lateral prefrontal cortex. And then the fourth one is involved in emotionality, where we sit emotionally at present compared to where we think we will be emotionally when we reach some particular goal. And that's the orbitofrontal cortex. Okay? Again, you don't need to know all those names. You don't need to know all the details. Just understand that those different elements are involved in the decision-making processes that lead us toward particular goals and have us update our goal seeking, etc. One key thing is it doesn't matter what the goal is, the same circuits are involved. So whether or not you're trying to build a company that's a $1 billion company that's going to go public, or you're thinking about planning a crafts day at home with the kids or for yourself, or you're thinking about what movie to go see, goals, goal seeking, and assessing progress towards goals all involve the exact same neural circuits. It's really remarkable. It's also very convenient for our discussion today. What's going on in these circuits can basically be boiled down to 2